So today in our Chiang Mai studio, Theistic Media Studio, is guest Bhakti Vidhan Mahayogi. He is editor-in-chief of the Guardian of Devotion Press and was responsible with Goswami Maharaj to bring into the world 5 books of Sidhar Maharaj. Mahayogi Maharaj, the first and main thing people don't know, that's you actually got sannyas from Sidhar Maharaj. So let us dive a little bit in the prehistory of this. What kind of person you were when you joined Krishna consciousness, and how did you got connection with it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank anybody who's watching this for paying attention to our broadcast tonight, and I want to thank the devotees here in Chiang Mai, the Russian devotees, the Chinese devotees, and especially Gorky Shore and Radhakant, Amya Sindhu, Bhakti Lalita, Indu Lekha, and everyone else who's here present for giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about Krishna consciousness, how we published our books, my past involvement and service to Sidhar Maharaj. It's a very personal question you're asking, because that gets back into my whole history. And I don't really want to bore everyone with my story. I have a very long and checkered past. We have an hour, but I don't know that everyone really wants to know about me. Goswami Maharaj told us to film a little something about my life. He said, Bhakti Vidhan Mahayogi is the unsung hero of Guardian of Devotion Press. And in a sense, he's right, because I didn't get a lot of credit for what I did, but we're told by the Bhagavad Gita, Karmanyevadhikara stema paleshu karachana. We're not supposed to take credit for what we're doing. It's not really part of being a devotee. What we do selflessly. Just as the devotees who are here in the studio today are recording this, they may not be recognized in history 30 years from now for what they're doing. Perhaps they will be. I'm sure someone will. Maybe one of you will become a great cameraman or broadcaster. But at the present moment, you're doing what you do selflessly without really asking for anything. So to say that I was the unsung hero is to say that perhaps I wanted some glory. I wanted to be sung. And I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, really, in a sense, the unsung hero of the Guardian of Devotion Press is Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami, because while he gave concepts and ideas, and while he harmonized problems that we might have had as devotees, in a way he's been superseded by others who followed him, who had the ability to organize a big mission or draw devotees together and create societies and companies, even like this one. And in some sense, perhaps his contribution has been forgotten. I noticed that the book that you have up on the screen, The Golden Volcano of Divine Love, it's an original copy, but we only printed about 5,000 of those original copies. So to some extent, even the books that we're discussing have fallen into forgetfulness. And I think it's important to bring out Sridhar Maharaj's role as our preceptor, our guru, our mentor, and the person who's giving the idea and the concept of the books. But if you're really interested in my history, I should say something, because that establishes me. So I was born in 1953 in Santa Monica, California. In my teens, when I was an adolescent, I suppose I had the same kind of problems that many young people have. They don't feel accepted. They don't fit in. I was very intellectual. I liked to read. And from a young age, I was fascinated with the Bhagavad Gita. At that time, the Vietnam War was going on in the United States, and it was a great conflict. Boys were being sent to fight and die, not very far from here, in fact, a few hundred miles probably. in Vietnam. And that upset me. I followed the anti-war movement. And I remember I liked the music of Joan Baez and Bob Dylan. And Joan Baez was a very strident anti-war spokesman or spokeswoman. And she relied to some extent on the teachings of Gandhi. At that time, everybody liked Gandhi because he promoted nonviolence. And Gandhi's interesting because while he read the Bhagavad Gita and did so in public meetings, his real connection with the Bhagavad Gita is through Tolstoy. And Tolstoy fascinated me. I loved War and Peace, Anna Karenina. I also liked reading Dostoevsky and to some extent Chekhov, but I preferred Dostoevsky because he talks about the big questions. Dostoevsky talks about God and the soul. He says that God must exist because if he doesn't, then nothing has any value. What's the point of living if there's no God? Very strong, very powerful, very heavy, Dostoevsky. So I was reading these Russian authors. In part because I had epilepsy when I was a boy. And somebody gave me a book called The Idiot. I don't know how you say that in Russian. Maybe it's idiot. Yes? Huh? Do you know this book? All right. The main character is Prince Mishkin. And he's very innocent. And somebody, knowing that I had epilepsy, gave me this book because the central character, of course, is an epileptic. But as a consequence of his brain trauma, he has some kind of unusual spiritual connection. And I liked that book. So then I read Tolstoy and found that he had an anti-war stance and had contributed to Gandhi's pacifism. But when I read deeper, I found that really Tolstoy got his impression from an American author named Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau. He wrote a book called Civil Disobedience, where he says, you shouldn't follow orders if the orders are not morally based. And he refused to fight against Mexico. He was called to fight against Mexico, and he said, I'm not going in any war against Mexico because the government is sending me to war on an immoral basis. And strangely, Thoreau got his inspiration from the Bhagavad Gita. So Gandhi's line of, Shiksha Guru Parampara, if you like, actually originates with the Bhagavad Gita, but through Henry David Thoreau and Tolstoy. It's a very strange line. Later, when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I had to ask, well, you promote peace. You say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy, and we'll have peace. But when I read your book, the Bhagavad Gita, what I find is war. Krishna is telling Arjuna, fight. How do you reconcile this? And the explanation they gave was a good one. They said, well, Krishna is a Arjuna is a warrior. It's his dharma. He can't not be a warrior. He has to fight. And of course, you can take it to a higher and a deeper level, and the Bhagavad Gita does. But my point is, I became interested in the transcendental teachings of Srila Prabhupada and the Bhagavad Gita at an early age. Also, I lived in Los Angeles, California. So in those days, the Hare Krishna devotees, they used to make Harinam Sankirtan every day on Hollywood Boulevard, or practically every day. Maybe it was once a week, but it seemed like every day. Also in Westwood. And you'd get a crew of about 35 devotees dressed in their dhotis and saris, jumping up and down, playing their drums. And it was psychedelic. It was cool. It was weird. It's interesting that the other day, last Sunday, I went on the Harinam Kirtan here in Chiang Mai, and people had a very similar reaction to what I saw 40 years ago. So we're still strange after all these years. We're still weird. But that's a good thing, you know? I look at myself in the mirror and I see a dull, boring old man, and it must be difficult for you to look at this video and see this dull, boring old man talk about some old book from 30 years ago. But go out on the street with our drums and cartels, and we're still weird. You know, you could have a homosexual motorcycle gang with beards and tattoos cruise down the street, and people will say, "Oh, I accept them. They're okay. I understand where they're coming from," you know? But to be a Hare Krishna devotee with a shaved head, tilak, kunti mala, dhoti, banging on a drum, and performing Nam Sankirtan, it still shocks people. So it shocked me back then, and I thought perhaps these people are completely crazy. But I had a repeated contact with them because at the college where I used to go, UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, you would walk past them all the time, and they would give you the incense and the Bhakti Godhead magazine. And one day, I finally bought the Bhagavad Gita because I heard that Gandhi liked it, and it was anti-war or whatever. And I sat down and began to read it, and I was impressed. Later, a friend of mine had this idea to go visit New Orleans, and I hope I'm not speaking too long, but it's a long story, you know. He wanted to visit New Orleans because he'd seen it. This is a cool place to go. And we hitchhiked from Los Angeles. We put our thumbs out and said, "Yeah, give us a ride." It's about, I don't know, 2,000 miles to New Orleans. We had no idea what we were doing. It was completely ridiculous and stupid. Don't try it. And my friend said, "But I have a plan. I got a plan, Mike." "Yeah, what's your plan?" We're gonna crash at the Hare Krishna temple." "Yeah, who are they?" And he told me, and it was like, I know who they are. I've seen them before. So we went to the Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and it was the first time I saw police brutality up close. There were these big, huge, fat, white policemen armed with truncheons or billy clubs, beating black people in the middle of the street, throwing them down on the ground, and 10 or 12 cops would be beating on them and then throwing them in the back of paddy wagons. It was terrible. You know, I went to the Mardi Gras thinking, hey, this is a celebration, this is cool. But drunken people doing nasty, dirty things in the street, it was a big turnoff, as we used to say back in the day. And the interesting thing was there was a contrast between this kind of behavior and what we saw in the Hare Krishna temple, because then we'd go upstairs. And in those days, I guess it was kind of primitive. This must have been 1972 or 3 or so. And they just put out the Radha Krishna Temple album, which was a big black LP. And they would play it on the record player. That was our technology at the time. And the devotees would sit around and pack incense. So the floor was about that thick with the dust from the incense. They were using strawberry incense at the time. So when you came in and took off your shoes, your feet would get covered with purple or red dust. And it looked like the devotees really had lotus feet. You know, they had fragrant lotus feet from all the incense. So inhaling all the incense and listening constantly to the, you know, Radha Krishna Temple album where they're chanting, and Prabhupada is chanting, entered my soul. It changed me. And we sat down and had prasadam, and it was a transcendental experience. If I keep talking about it, I'll lose it. I'll start to cry. So that was
like 40 plus years ago? And you were
about 37, you know, but let's call it 40. 82. I like to exaggerate. I was class of 1976. Finally, I wound up in Los Angeles, and things were not going well in my life. I was a frustrated young man. My thoughts turned to suicide. I was thinking about ending it all, you know, and there was a Bhakti Godhead magazine on the table. And it was like, there's an old joke about this man, Jack Benny. He was an entertainer. He was famous for being tight. He didn't like to spend any money. So he's getting robbed. And the robber says, "Your money or your life?" And Jack Benny goes, "My money or my life?" My money or my life? Because he's so interested, he's so attached to his money, he can't make a decision. So I was like, leave this world? What's this magazine here? Or leave this world? What's this magazine? Join the Hare Krishnas and see the world. And there used to be an advertisement in the back of the magazine for the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, which a friend of mine, Brahmadas, was involved in. If he's out there, I say hello and I salute you, Brahmadas. And they had these Volkswagen vans they would travel around in with their drums and a harmonium and deities. They had, at one point, a school bus. And they would park the school bus in a park and make a festival and cook rice and serve people and chant Hare Krishna. And it was like the magic wonderland of Hare Krishna. So they put an advertisement in the Bhakti Godhead magazine, join the Hare Krishna movement and see the world. And I thought, that's for me. So I went to the temple at 3764 Watseka Avenue in Culver City, California, which is very close to the MGM studios where they used to make all those movies. And I said, sign me up. I'm ready to go. And they said, well, do you have any material possessions? And I said, well, I have a guitar, and here's my grandfather's ring. I gave him my grandfather's silver ring, and whatever. I had a stereo. They said, okay, that's good. And at that time, there was a man named Donavir who ran a thing called the Bhakti program, which was new. Because they had so many people coming to join the temple, they wanted to train them up. Because they didn't want just anybody. They had to screen people a little bit. And so we would sit down every afternoon in a circle and we would read the Upadeshamrita by Rupa Goswami, which is the Nectar of Instruction. So it's a really great book with great advice on how to live. For example, it talks about, it says you should establish a loving relationship with a devotee in 6 different ways. You can speak your mind in confidence. Vacho, that was a different one. Vacho vegam manasakura, that's all in there. Speak your mind in confidence and ask confidential questions. Make exchanges. Give a gift and, expect a gift. Take a gift in confidence and exchange prasadam. And all my life, these precepts have really served me well. I may not have been a great devotee for the last, so many years, but these precepts really served me well. Anyways, we were all excited at the time because that year Srila Prabhupada came to Los Angeles, and we used to walk on the beach in Santa Monica where I was born, and I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada. So at that time I joined the movement.
So you found in this movement more instructions and more heartfelt way to live when you were like young and finding the way than anything else. And since after that, usually the path people come to Sidhar Maharaj is they heard the instructions of Prabhupada to come for instructions for Sidhar Maharaj, or Goswami Maharaj. He is also known as the person who brought Sidhar Maharaj to the Western world, first with his records and afterwards with the books of Sidhar Maharaj. So how did you connect it with Sidhar Maharaj yourself?
Yeah, I'm really sorry to give long answers because it's not really very good for your interview. But you're asking me questions that go pretty deep. So if you please excuse me, I have an extended answer. I hope I don't bore people. But this is for the record. So I joined the Hare Krishna movement in 1976. I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada when he came to Los Angeles, and my name was Mukunda Maladas. That was my Mukunda Maladas Brahmachari. I was given saffron cloth and kunti mala. And everybody, all this, the Los Angeles temple was a big temple. We had upwards of 500 people there at the time. I was telling you, when we went to India, a couple years later, we all went to India on a 747 airplane. It was Air India. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, we're flying at 35,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, and it's time for Mangal Arti. So the devotees, put away their japa beads and picked up their kartals and mridangas on the airplane. And we had a rousing kirtan, thundering kirtan, in the airplane, in a 747, flying at 35,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean. What did the flight crew say? They were happy. They were ecstatic. It was Air India. Everybody loved it. So times have changed. You can't do that now. But I was involved in that way with the Los Angeles chapter of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness for a couple of years. Then we went to Laguna Beach, which was a smaller center, and we did these collection programs where they would send 3 or 4 men out in a van. One man would cook and maybe give the lecture in the morning, and one man was the driver, and the other 2 we would preach and distribute our books and sell our books. And I fulfilled my promise. I joined the Hare Krishnas and traveled to see the world. We went all over the United States. We opened up the national parks in the United States: Carlsbad Caverns, Yellowstone National Park, Yosemite, Mount Rushmore. And we would travel to the national parks and stop people and give them the book and try to interest them in buying it. It was very difficult. It was very hard to sell. We'd have to say something like, "Excuse me," and someone would say, "I don't have time." And you'd say, "Well, sir, you don't have time, of course, but time has you. Have you ever thought about your eternal life?" It was very hard to sell. In a way, these tactics that we use probably did a lot to destroy our reputation as happy spiritual people. But my name is Mahayogi, not Yogi. Lots of times when I meet people who like yoga, if I tell them my name is Mahayogi, they go, "Oh no, I can't do that. You're not a Mahayogi." But Mahayogi, it means big yoga. And it's not big yoga because I'm a big man and I like to eat. It's big yoga because this is Krishna Bhakti yoga. That means when you come into contact with Mahaprabhu and you're trying to spread the message of Krishna consciousness, sometimes by doing that we come in conflict with other people. It's natural. So people tend to think of us as being conflictive because we don't sit down and go, Om Shanti. But that's not where we're at. We're lovers. We believe in Krishna and we love him and we love his message and we want other people to know about it. So we preach. It's a preaching mission. Anyways, to get back to your question, we passed a little bit of time doing this. And I went to India, came back, and very shortly after this, Srila Prabhupada disappeared from this earth. At that time, the idea was to continue his work and be loyal to his mission, and the American devotees tried to take his place. But a devotee like Srila Prabhupada, a guru like Srila Prabhupada, comes maybe once in 10,000 years, maybe once in 1,000,000 years, maybe once in the lifetimes of 10 million Brahmas. It's not an ordinary circumstance. And when he's no longer there, how do you do his job? You can say, well, we're going to continue his work. He'll live forever in his books. His message will live on. And you can do that for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. Just like right now, I know Srila Govinda Maharaj is no longer with us, but I can't accept that. I think he's still here. I think he's in India somewhere. See? But if you're faced with the reality, no, actually he's not. He's entered the divine plane. It's very difficult. And the devotees of Prabhupada, his disciples, God bless them, they tried to continue the mission as best they could. They told me, okay, now you need to take mantra initiation. If you want to be useful to the mission, you have to have mantra initiation. You can't be a pujari. You can't really enter into Krishna consciousness fully if you don't have mantra initiation. So I took initiation, mantra initiation from Rameshwar Maharaj. But, a few months later, I was sold. But, some time passed and I realized this is not the same vibration. I'm not getting the same energy. I'm not getting any light from my guru-disciple relationship here. And that troubled me. And I got depressed. I was so depressed that I returned to where I was before, and I thought another time of taking my life. I thought, why do I want to be here? I can't do this. At that time, I came in connection with a devotee in Los Angeles whose name was Dayalu Dulal. And he said, look, if you're having some spiritual problems because you need to go deeper, the person you need to see is Sidhar Maharaj. In India, across the river from the Mayapur temple in Navadvip, there's a spiritual god brother of Prabhupada. And if you want to take it to another level, go see him. And I thought, wow, that's complicated. How do I do that? But I made we had permission to distribute our books at the Central Zoo in Los Angeles. And later, we convinced a court that distributing prasadam was our God-given First Amendment freedom of speech right. And they said, well, yes, it's sacred food. So I set up a little stand selling orange juice. I had 2 Mexican devotees working with me. They worked really hard. We squeezed orange juice, and we sold it to the Mexican people who came to the zoo. And the other thing they liked were cucumbers. We'd slice a cucumber like that and put some chili on it, give them half a limon, a lime, sell it to them for $1. And every Saturday, I made $1,000 doing that. I know it's hard to believe. But we figured this out one day. We were in downtown Los Angeles, and we saw, hey, the Mexicans like this. Let's do it at the zoo. So thanks to the Mexican people, I was able to collect enough money to go to India and see Sidhar Maharaj.
In one weekend.
Huh?
In one weekend.
No, not in one weekend, because if I made $1,000 every weekend, I'd give the temple $800. And I kept a little back, right? It burned my conscience that I wasn't giving everything to Krishna. But after about 8 weeks of that, I had enough money that I could do that. But, there were problems with, when Prabhupada disappeared, rival groups were there, and, there was dissension, schism, different camps. And because I was good at collecting money at that time, somebody heard that I was going to India, I was going to go see Sidhar Maharaj, and they came after me. They didn't want me to go. So with a couple other devotees, Gautama and Kashiram, I went to San Francisco to see dear Krishna Swami, because Dayalu Dulal told me, if you want to go to India, talk to him. He's the man. He knows all about Sidhar Maharaj. He's got these tapes. So we went to San Francisco, and at that time, dear Krishna Swami was trying to establish something, but he was having difficulty. He was negotiating something with some people in San Francisco who were friendly and favorable. And I told him what my plan was, and he said, yeah, do it. He encouraged me. He said, go see Sidhar Maharaj. So to make a long story short, we went to see Sidhar Maharaj. It was around 1981, and I went with 2 or 3 other devotees. Kashiram was looking to take sannyas, because at that time there was a moratorium, and you couldn't take sannyas. So I wanted to change this relationship and find a true guru, because I felt like I really got something from Srila Prabhupada, but then it was turned off. So where's the nectar? Where's the divine love? Show me, what is it? I don't know. I want you to show me the love, something like that. I forget the song. Anyway, so we went to see Sidhar Maharaj. I arrived. I explained the situation. After some time, we didn't just see him on the first day, but we were staying in the mat. And it was a different experience, because Sidhar Maharaj was a warm human being. He wasn't an egotist. He wasn't thinking, well, I am the big guru, you know, who are you, you know, get away. You want to know about me, buy one of my books, you know. Why don't you buy one of my t-shirts, you know, join the membership. It wasn't like that at all. He was a very humble person, you know, open and deep, like an ocean. So we didn't see him on the first day or the second day, but gradually he agreed to meet with us, and we would ask him questions, and he would talk to us for about an hour or two a day. When I explained my situation, he said, what? You want to do what? Because the idea was, if I left ISKCON and I left my guru-disciple relationship with Rameshwar Maharaj, that would be an insult to ISKCON, and it would be compounded if Sidhar Maharaj gave me initiation. Effectively, he's saying, what you're giving is not real. What I'm giving is the real thing. And that's a slap in the face and could cause problems, obviously. And being the selfish person that I am, I didn't really, you know, consider that too thoughtfully. I was just thinking about me. And other devotees were angry at me for that. They said, why are you doing this? Other devotees who had taken first initiation from Prabhupada and wanted second initiation, they're like, well, hey, we're clean. We went to Prabhupada. Now we're going to Sidhar Maharaj. We're doing the right thing. You know, leaving, you know, getting reinitiated, don't do that. That's going to create problems. So, you know, just like I held, you know, $200 a week back from the collection so I could go to India, you know, I feel bad about having created any problem. So, you know, I apologize to the devotees, and probably created a lot of Vaishnava aparad by promoting any schism with ISKCON, but I couldn't do anything else. I was desperate. So what Sidhar Maharaj told me was, he said, go see Govinda Maharaj, because he didn't want to touch this. And he was thinking, the person who can handle these things, that's Govinda Maharaj. And that's how I met Govinda Maharaj. Of course, he called him Govinda Maharaj, but the person who would come to the temple was a very slim, well-dressed, you know, Bengali man, you know, in Grihastha Vesh, you know, with lots of curly black hair and a big smile. And he was Govinda Sundar Vidyaranjan, but Sidhar Maharaj called him Govinda Maharaj because later we found out, oh, he's a sannyasi. Wow. We didn't know how to handle that, but that's besides the point. I took shelter of Govinda Maharaj so that Sidhar Maharaj would take care of me. So finally he did that, and he gave me, you know, Brahmin initiation, mantra initiation, and he gave sannyas to my friend Kashiram, and we returned. I had a return ticket to California, because in San Francisco there was Dear Krishna Maharaj. Well, we stayed in London. We got off the airplane in London. We broke our flight. My friend told me, you can do that. I said, you can do that? Yes, you can get off. You're in England. Just walk out the door. Really? I said, isn't it going to be cold? Nah. But I read Charles Dickens, you know. It's freezing cold. People are dying. No, don't worry about that. Okay. So I got off the plane in London, and we went to the Bhakti Vedanta Manor, which was George Harrison's old property, and he had a recording studio down there. So I sat in the recording studio of the Beatles and played my mridanga and tried to feel the vibration, you know. But anyway, we preached there for a couple of months, but it got uncomfortable for the guru at the time in London, who was interested in Sidhar Maharaj, but he didn't want to break with ISKCON or make any problems with anyone. So he had a small mission in South Africa. I told you this story the other day, but we're doing it for this camera. So he said, go to South Africa. I said, all right. What do I do? I'll give you a ticket. Okay. So I had my trusty Back to Godhead magazine, and in there was the address for the center. And I tried calling from the airport, but there was no answer. And I thought, well, I'll work it out. I arrive in South Africa. I think I had about $300, you know. Got off the plane, took a bus, tried to locate the general area, tried to call again, no answer. Got off the bus in the middle of nowhere, started walking. And I thought, wait a minute. So I knocked on a door at some farm, and a South African man came out like, what do you want? And I explained, I'm looking for these friends. They have a farm out here. I said, oh, I'll drive you. So we spent about 2 hours driving around trying to find the Hare Krishna farm, and he couldn't understand the address. Finally, he dropped me off, and I walked up the street, and now it's dark. I came to a house with a wall and a door, and I opened the door, and there were 3 dogs, a Doberman Pinscher, a German Shepherd, and a Pit Bull Terrier, all armed, you know, armed and dangerous, going, and I froze. I thought they were going to eat me. And somehow I managed to knock on the door. Somebody came out, what do you want? And I told them. And they said, no, there's no, I don't know what you're talking about. Hare Krishna, what's that? The man went to get his wife and talked to her. Yeah, the people who sold you this house. Oh. And he made a couple of phone calls and figured it out, that they'd moved the temple. It was in the city of Johannesburg. I could go there the next day, so they put me up for the night. In South Africa, I connected with some devotees there, and, you know, we kept it going for a while. But finally, I got a phone call from Goswami Maharaj, at that time, Dear Krishna Swami. He said, so, you know, how did it go? You saw Sridhar Maharaj? And I said, yes, I did. He said, good. And I said, listen, I did some work for Bhagavad Gita. I've published a few things. I'm actually a writer, you know. And I have an idea of how we could make a book for Sridhar Maharaj. He said, yeah, I'm listening. So I explained to him a few of my ideas, and he said, listen, why don't you come to San Francisco? Actually, now we're in San Jose, California, and I have a temple here. So I got on the airplane, arrived in San Jose, and we sat down and started to talk. Well, you know, how would we do this? You know, what's your idea? And I said, well, look, I saw the other day, there's this guru called Bhagavan somebody. I won't give him dignity by, you know, vibrating his name, but Bhagavan so-and-so, you know. And Bhagavan so-and-so has 100 different books that he's written. But I checked it out. He doesn't really write the books. What he does is he speaks, and then somebody types up what he says. And somebody else looks at that and creates, chapter by chapter, based on a theme, a book, and they publish it. He said, yeah, we could do that. I have a lot of ideas, and we've already gotten started on taking his tapes and transcribing them. And I said, okay, well, let me see what you have. So I sat down, and we went over some things, and we could see that the transcriptions were not really very good. The problem was that Srila Sidhar Maharaj spoke English with a very unusual accent. It was somewhere between Bengali and Scottish, because he learned English in the seminary with Scottish Jesuits, and very well educated, of course, extremely erudite, but he had a bit of a Scottish brogue, and behind that there was a Bengali lilt. And if you didn't understand what he was saying, it was very hard to get used to his style of speaking. Also, he would pepper his discourse with a lot of quotes from Bengali literature, like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, or he would quote a lot of Sanskrit from the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam. And he would speak a fragment of a quote from the Bhagavatam, and then a little of his interpretation, and then throw some Bengali on it. And then somebody would walk in the door and say, Govinda Maharaj is here. Oh, he's here? And there would be a back and forth conversation. So to properly transcribe Sridhar Maharaj and then sift out his message and then translate the shlokas from Sanskrit and the verses in Bengali and give that some sense. We saw that would take a lot of work, but we felt we could do it. And Goswami Maharaj, he encouraged me, saying, yes, you can do this. Partly, in fact, because he was very busy organizing a mission, trying to get money together to pay for the new temple that we just bought, seeing to it that there's gasoline in the cars, the telephone works, talking to people on the phone day and night, promoting Sidhar Maharaj, listening to the cassettes himself to try to get an idea of what's being said there, preaching. And it's difficult to sit down very quietly in a room for a long time and listen to the same thing again and again and again and try to make sense of it. So he told me that, we bought a typewriter. That was our big investment. At that time, the typewriter was like you have an Apple computer and lights and camera and action. The IBM Selectric typewriter was the high technology of the day because it had a little ball and it had a strip of white plastic, and you could actually, as you're typing, go back 2 or 3 letters and correct what you had just done. It was called the IBM Selectric, and we were so impressed with it. And he told me this time that I came to visit him that typewriter cost $800, and it was more than we had. And I was just rereading Search for Sri Krishna, and at one point, Sridhar Maharaj is explaining, he was constructing a temple, and a big contributor had given some money to help with the construction, but it wasn't completed. So to impress him, Sridhar Maharaj borrowed money and then built the wall so that when the contributor came, he'd see, wow, oh, they're building it. But he didn't know how he was going to pay the loan. And he told Saraswati Thakur, yeah, I did this. I borrowed this money. I don't know if that was a good idea. And Saraswati Thakur told him, he said, you've mortgaged your future to Krishna, which is beyond the call, because it's one thing to surrender today, what you're doing today, but you surrendered your future because you're going to have to pay for that in the future. And so Goswami Maharaj, he mortgaged our future buying that typewriter because we didn't have the money to pay for it, but he believed in the project. And the next thing he bought was, he had a little machine with a foot pedal and earphones that connected to a tape recorder, so you could listen to the tape recorder, and he would say, Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak, and you'd hit the switch, and it would go Bhajate Mam Ananya, and you hit the switch, Bhajate Mam, oh, he's saying Bhajate Mam Ananya Bhak, okay. And then you would, so between the foot pedal and the dictation machine and the IBM Selectric typewriter, we had the most advanced technology, and we proceeded to begin transcribing Sridhar Maharaj's tapes and converting them into books. Then we would sit down together at the end of the day and reread some of the transcripts, and it would refresh his memory, and Goswami has a photographic memory for certain things. So I would say, I remember when Govinda Maharaj came in that day. He just got back from Calcutta. And, oh, you remember so-and-so Prabhu, he was there. Oh, that's right. That was a Thursday, really? Yeah, it was Brihaspatibar. Okay. So the other conversation that he gave about reality the beautiful, that took place a couple of days before. Yeah, right, I think it was a Tuesday. So we go back and forth and put these snips and fragments together until we had a viable chapter. And in this way, we would work until we had enough material to put together a chapter. And we worked up about 18 different chapters, and then we'd look at the chapters and say, nah, we can't use this. Forget it. Maybe this is okay for another book, but not right now. And so we had to start looking at themes and ideas that we could put together and include in a work. So that leads us up to the time of the San Jose Mat. But I'm sorry it took so much time to explain.
But also working on these books requires some like invasion or introduction to Sidhar Maharaj's world. Like he's famous from lectures of Goswami Maharaj, you know. He is famous for picking his words precisely. Like he is putting his thoughts into words very accurately. And also he have his like own levels of things, like gradation. So how did you how were you dealing with that, and how did you transfer that condense this from all the lectures?
Well,
it's like it's not easy to get this.
Yeah, this is a good point. What you're saying is interesting, because if you think about the value of Sidhar Maharaj's contribution, you know, philosophically or in terms of Siddhanta, Vaishnava Siddhanta. Siddhanta means the end of knowledge or the perfection of knowledge. If you think about his contribution, it's very fascinating, because where Prabhupada's contribution, you know, according to, you know, Paschatya Deshatarine, that's his pranam mantra, it says he brought Krishna consciousness to the Western world. That's really Prabhupada's contribution. You can, of course, he has more. That's not all that he did. But his perhaps outstanding contribution, he brought Krishna consciousness to the Western world. Okay? But if you look at what he gave, you know, the Srimad Bhagavatam, I don't know, it runs into 50 volumes. I don't know how many volumes his translation finally ran into, but say 50 volumes. Chaitanya Charitamrita, 17 volumes. The Bhagavad Gita, 800 pages. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya, another, you know, 750 pages. Book after book after book. So if you begin with, you know, Janmaryasya Yatan Vayad Tatara, you know, if you begin with the first line of the Srimad Bhagavatam and read it shloka for shloka, there's so much there that you get lost. You know, you can get lost in the first canto before you really even get to the story of Krishna in the 10th canto. Thousands of pages of commentary and Sanskrit, and Chaitanya Charitamrita is like that too, and the Bhagavad Gita. So what happened in the Western movement to some extent is, you know, different devotees would become obsessed or fascinated with a particular aspect, like the Bhagavad Gita, and they'd say, okay, this is it. You know, it's yoga. That's what we're doing. The idea of Siddhanta is you can break it down and make it simple, and at the same time go deep. And that's what Sidhar Maharaj did. A lot of people think that his books are for the intelligentsia, they're for the intellectuals. But it's not really so much that his books are for the intellectuals, as much as what he's giving is very condensed. You can read one page of the search for Sri Krishna or one page of Guru and His Grace and just go, wow, my mind is blown. That turns some concepts I had on their head. So Sridhar Maharaj's ideas are powerful and deep. At the same time, I think, having been trained by the Jesuits in English literature, Romantic literature, German philosophers like Hegel, and, you know, idealist philosophers like Bishop Berkeley, who he quotes all the time, he understood very well how to present this to the Westerners. And at the same time, having given thousands and thousands of speeches and discourses, Sridhar Maharaj knew how to present an idea. So if you look at a little bit the distinction between Prabhupada and Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada was able to bring the message to the West, but Sridhar Maharaj's message is carefully distilled so that you understand who are the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Because if you sit and read the Bhagavad Gita, you can say, okay, well, we're yogis. We're trying to get in touch with the infinite. We want to know about the soul. But Guru Maharaj will let you know on every page, on every one of his books, that what we're doing is, it's not exactly Krishna, it's really more Radha Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gaudiya Vaishnava, Rupanuga Bhakti. We have a particular line that we're adhering to, and that's the line that was promoted by Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And if you have any doubts about that line, Sidhar Maharaj can clear that up for you. And that's what you find expressed on every page of Search for Sri Krishna. So I would say that's really his perfect contribution, that if you read him, he's not talking about, okay, well, we have to break this down so that you understand, over here is reincarnation, and over here we're vegetarians and we don't eat meat, and over here the soul is eternal, and over here Krishna is God, and over here it's okay if you're a Christian, you can still chant Hare Krishna, which are all, these are very good and important, needful messages. But Sridhar Maharaj is giving you, with every breath, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So, it's coming from Radha Krishna to Mahaprabhu to the Goswamis to our line to Guru Maharaj to you without any break. You're getting that message live and in color. Whereas, you know, perhaps to help, you know, the Western devotees, sometimes the need is felt to broaden the message, make it simpler. You know, I don't know if any of you have seen the comic book Amar Chitra Katha. Those are great comic books, right? Because they can kind of jog your memory and help you remember things, or even, you know, give you a visual idea of how something might be. But if we accept the Disney version of Krishna consciousness, we run the risk of trivializing things and thinking, well, this is okay for children. Like some people think, well, you know, bananas and hot milk and Krishna book, that's okay for children when they're 6 years old. And it's nice because we want young people to understand the values that we're trying to promote. But on the other hand, we run the risk of saying, well, this is really for babies, it's really for children, don't take it seriously. The real serious thing is the fight with Maya and, you know, the eternal soul. But, you know, Sridhar Maharaj, he kept it real. And, you know, we don't really have time here to get into his whole message, but I hope we didn't take too much time to, you know, discuss these things, and you know, that I hope that I could serve you by.
But you know, when I first read
my
like
experience.
Search for Shri Krishna was the first book in this series.
That's right.
And it fits some necessity that, like, in my time I read, and even the foreword was that was very inspiring. That you like don't settle with somebody found the truth for himself or like whatever. You must yourself take it. Like, take the path of the sages and the scriptures and go and get this, like, finish this way, you, like, to fulfill your desires.
That's right. So the search for Sri Krishna begins.
Your books made the same thing as you first when you were a young man, like,
that's right.
Oh, maybe I can walk this path. These books, as you were surprised when you came to Chiang Mai, you said, I wrote these books, but then for some time I wasn't monitoring, I wasn't in touch, but then I was so amazed that so many people, so many translations, and such a large expansion of this thing.
Yeah, so the search for Sri Krishna, if you look at it, you know, try to understand it in a nutshell or in a condensed way, begins with the search for reality and talks about ontology. Where do we come from? Where are we going? How? And it closes with the teachings of Ramananda Roy, which give you the highest understanding of Krishna consciousness. I should add that later I was determined to promote the teachings of Sridhar Maharaj, and I felt that others were not as qualified as I was. So I insisted on taking sannyas at a very early age. I was in my early 30s, 1984, so I was, I guess, 31 years old. And it was probably an immature thing to do. But so I took mantra and sannyas initiation from Srila Sidhar Maharaj and Harinam initiation from Srila Prabhupada. Later, as a consequence of Sidhar Maharaj's disappearance, our organization perhaps suffered from similar symptoms as ISKCON had before it. And it was difficult for me to continue, for different reasons that I don't really want to go into. But it became difficult for me to continue. And so my participation really came to an end. But I like to think that just as a football player who gives his all to the football league and sacrifices his youth to his club, and then later he has to hang up his shoes, you know, maybe my contribution won't be entirely forgotten, and it wasn't all for naught. And as you were saying, what astonishes me today is to come to a far-off place, a far-off corner of the world in the jungles of Chiang Mai, and find that our books have been translated into Russian, into other languages. And not only have our books been translated into Russian and are available today, but there are human representatives of those books, the Vaishnavas, who can give me back what I was searching for so long ago. So I thank all of you for giving me this opportunity.
And we will dive deep in the 5 books of Sidhar Maharaj in our coming series.
Well, I'm very happy any participation I can give, and any of you who are listening out there, try to buy our books somewhere. Get your hands on a copy of Search
Link
for
will
Sri
be
Krishna.
available right below the video.
Yeah, we should make promotion so these books are not lost in time. But thank all of you for having me here in Chiang Mai, and I thank Avadut Maharaj for everything.
Jai Srila Bhakti Sudhir Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhakti Bimala Avadut Maharaj ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhakti Namalacharya Maharaj ki Jai, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai.